Vladimir Putin has warned the West against interfering in Ukraine, saying that his country would unleash counter-strikes against threats he deems unacceptable. His comments come as Russia makes gains in Ukraine's east and south. Ukraine's defense ministry says Russian troops have captured several towns in the eastern Donbass region. Meanwhile, in the besieged city of Mariupol, residents are facing increasingly desperate conditions.
In the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, people sing for a passage to safety for their fellow citizens in Mariupol. But inside the besieged city, ordinary people do what they can to carry on, queuing for hours for their pensions as money runs out. We came to the pension fund to get in line, to register for our pensions, because money has run out. The salaries of pensioners who used to work have stopped. A Ukrainian commander inside the city's Astoval steelworks said hundreds of injured civilians remain trapped. In our group, there are more than 600 wounded fellows with different levels of gravity. They badly need medical help. Here, there are no conditions, no medicine, no personnel who could help them. We have wounded civilians. We help them as much as we can. Protesters clashed with Russian forces in the occupied city of Kherson after the former mayor was reappointed by the Russians. The protesters' message to their occupiers was clear: go home. Close to the front lines, in the eastern city of Kharkiv, it's a daily struggle to survive with what little they have. Many are living in cramped basements. The strain on their mental health is clear. May God end this war, she says. We are all going to end up in a mental hospital. All of us here are struggling. Below Kharkiv, metro stations are now one of the few safe places where children can play. A new life below the city, away from the dangers of Russian bombs.
Let's get the latest then from DW correspondent Emmanuel Shaz in Lviv in western Ukraine. Welcome, Emmanuel. And there's fighting not just in the east, but across the country.
Exactly, Phil. In fact, here in Lviv, we're in the west of the country, and yet daily almost we do have airstrikes. Those airstrikes, they are here in Lviv. Last week, 7 people died, 13 people were injured because there are military infrastructures that are of interest for Russian forces. Unfortunately, missiles also fall on civilians, as was the case last week. There are such infrastructures that are targeted by the Russians, and also railway infrastructures which are of interest for Russia because, of course, Russia imagines that weapons, especially weapons coming from Western allies, will circulate through the country either by road or by railway. So the efforts, of course, are focused at the moment on eastern Ukraine when it comes to heavy bombing, constant shelling in Donbass, in Donetsk, on Kherson, Kharkiv, Odessa, but the rest of the country is equally under threat, and many times a day you would hear the sirens here and you would have to take shelter until the end of the alert.
OK, so we saw in your report this is taking its toll on people's mental health. Tell us more about how people in affected areas are reacting.
Well, Phil, I'll start by giving you a figure. In the region, in the province of Luhansk, there was initially, before the war, 350,000 inhabitants. There's only 60,000 inhabitants left. 290,000 people have fled. They have fled towards western Ukraine. They have fled abroad in neighboring countries, Poland, Romania, Germany, Slovakia. That is to give you an idea just how massive the exodus of all those people is. In total, there's over 7 million displaced people within Ukraine and over 5 million refugees in neighboring countries. And for those who stay, for example, in the city of Kherson, in the south of the country, well, today people were protesting in the city center against Russian authorities who have seized the city, who have established a Russian administration in the city. They were protesting peacefully, those citizens. Well, they were dispersed with tear gas, with stun grenades as well. There were 4 civilians being injured. So people in those affected regions are not accepting this Russian occupation. And today I was in a shelter. I met with some people from Bucha and Kharkiv, and those were men, those were able men, and they came here. They want to train and they want to come back to defend their cities against the Russian invader.
Right. Now, the UN Secretary-General has now arrived in Kyiv. What can we expect from his talks with President Zelensky?
Well, Antonio Guterres had met previously on Tuesday Vladimir Putin, and he was hoping that Russia would let the United Nations take part to a humanitarian effort to evacuate civilians who are still trapped in the worst-affected areas, and not least the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. But here, authorities in Kiev are very skeptical that any humanitarian corridor could be open. We've seen talks stalling over the past few weeks, with even NGOs saying that probably what would be more efficient than any negotiation towards a humanitarian corridor would be a real ceasefire of 24, 48, 72 hours to allow civilians to go away, to take shelter where they want, and not to follow a specific route given by the authorities.
Thank you for that, Emmanuel Shaz in Lviv. So let's take a closer look at what Vladimir Putin means when he warned against countries intervening in Moscow's war in Ukraine. Here he is talking to Russian lawmakers today.
If anyone from outside moves to interfere in the current developments and creates unacceptable strategic threats for Russia, they should know that our response to encounter these assaults will be lightning fast. It will be quick. We have all the tools for this, the kind that no one else can boast of right now.
We can talk to Justin Crump. He's CEO of global risk analysis consultancy at Sibylline and a former British tank commander. Welcome to DW. Is President Putin stating the obvious, interfere and we'll come after you, or is there more to today's statement?
I mean, this is not the first time that Russians have made statements along these lines, of course. They've raised this numerous times since the start of the conflict. And there's a repeat each time of a reaction to the Western supply of weapons. Now, that Western supply of weapons is becoming more obvious. You know, there's larger equipment being provided. There's more signature equipment being provided. It's no longer just defensive. So I'm certain that Russia is increasingly being frustrated by this, but they're still responding by strikes within Ukraine. They haven't escalated the conflict yet outside of Ukraine. But I think the rhetoric will eventually have to be followed by action. And maybe that's what we're seeing with the imposition of restrictions on Poland and Bulgaria in regard to gas, potentially operations in cyberspace and other areas where Russia can start to extend the conflict and express its continued discontent at the fact that this support for Ukraine is, of course, helping to hinder Russia's progress on the battlefield.
Yeah, the extension of this conflict is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because now we have these mysterious explosions in Moldova's Russia-backed breakaway region. That's Transnistria, which borders Ukraine on the west. And, of course, people are worried now that this war is spilling over. Is that likely, this spillover?
I think, you know, and again, there's a very good point that we don't need to speculate too much around exactly what's happening in Transnistria for fear of starting rumours. But I think it is worth looking at how disorder in Transnistria, would benefit different sides. And I think clearly Russia benefits the most from this, and it does fit the Russian playbook of what happened in Donetsk and Luhansk. A state of emergency was generated that allowed mobilization. And right now, for Russia, being able to operate forces from Transnistria in more force than it currently has, as you said in the report, 1,500 soldiers at the moment in Transnistria, that's not enough to move against Odessa or even pretend to move against Odessa. But a few more forces, mobilization in Transnistria, justified cause for operations from there. That supports Russia's war aim, as declared earlier in the week, of moving towards taking all of southern Ukraine. And for now, most importantly, it allows Russia to present enough of a threat to Odessa and potentially to Mykolaiv from the west that it draws off Ukrainian forces from the Donbass. It stops Ukraine from reinforcing the main fight against Russia. So if you have to look at which side benefits more from this, it's definitely Russia in the way it sits. And so I think suspicion is obviously going to point that way, that this is an escalation to support Russia's war goals.
Just shifting the topics slightly, I'm intrigued by yesterday's meeting of 40-odd countries here in Germany, chaired by the US Defence Secretary. These are going to become monthly meetings to coordinate weapons supplies to Ukraine. What do you think that Ukraine needs now that the West isn't already providing? This is short of air defence cover. What else would prove decisive in this war?
Well, and you mentioned aerial support and the rebuilding of the Ukrainian Air Force, and actually some work has gone into spares for that. And Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, actually has now publicly said we should be providing actually aircraft to Ukraine, which was a red flag in the conflict 2 months ago. And I think the fact we're even now having a monthly donors conference shows how far thinking has moved on from the early days, when the assumption was that Ukraine would be fighting an insurgency after a couple of weeks, that Russia would have taken much of the country, and it was going to be a different sort of resistance. What we're actually seeing with full-fledged fighting in eastern Ukraine, in southern Ukraine. And hence that change in supplies. Germany now supplying anti-aircraft armoured vehicles, which are very effective against drones, low-flying helicopters, low-flying aircraft, the sort of threats we're seeing. Tanks being supplied to the point that Ukraine maybe has more tanks now than it started the conflict with, which, given 2 months of fighting, is astonishing, really, and Russia certainly can't say the same. And I think you're going to see more and more focus on these war-fighting supplies rather than defensive aid, rather than things that help an insurgency. And I think that'll be sustained. But the most important thing right now is artillery, and well over 150 NATO-caliber artillery pieces now pledged to Ukraine with supporting ammunition. And Bulgaria supplying Soviet-era ammunition. Maybe one reason that Bulgaria has been targeted and picked out for these the gas sanctions. So that's how it's going to keep developing. That's very clear. Thank you so much for that. Justin Crump from Risk Consultancy, Sibylle.